The first time Noah Reyes felt her hand slipping out of his, they were 5 stories up, and the hallway was full of smoke. The fire alarm shrieked. Sprinklers spat useless mist into flames that were already eating through the carpet. The hotel corridor twisted with heat lights flickering guests screaming as they shoved past overturned room service carts and broken glass. Noah's boots slid on the wet floor as he braced his back against the jammed stairwell door. With his other arm, he held on to the woman dangling over the open atrium, her heels scraping empty air, her fingers wet with sweat and soot. Below them, the lobby was chaos, firefighters shouting people, sobbing chunks of ceiling falling like burning snow. Up here, it was just him, her, and gravity. "Don't look down," he rasped. His lungs burned from smoke, but his voice stayed steady. The woman clutched a worn leather portfolio to her chest with her free hand, as if it mattered more than the flames licking closer. "Let it go," he barked. "Use both hands or you're not gonna make it." Her eyes met his, terrified, stubborn, and strangely familiar. Somewhere deep in the hotel, something exploded. The floor shuddered. Her grip slipped another inch. In that split second, as Noah dug his heels in, and every old injury in his body screamed he had no idea that the stranger he was hauling back from the edge was tied to the factory that killed his little brother. No idea that saving her would drag every buried secret of his family's past straight into the light. Before I go any further, tell me where you're listening from tonight, and hit that like and subscribe button if you believe courage still matters in this world. Noah Reyes was 37 years old and permanently tired. Most nights you could find him under a city bus on the south side of Tulsa, a wrench in one hand and a cup of gas station coffee in the other. He was the guy who kept the old diesel fleet wheezing along on bad roads and worse budgets. On paper, he was just another mechanic with a high school diploma. But there were things Noah didn't put on paper, like the tours he'd done as an army medic in places people only saw on the news. The nights he'd patched up soldiers with nothing but a headlamp and a kit he'd already used up twice. The scars on his shoulder from the convoy that didn't make it back. What he did put at the center of his life was 9-year-old Maya. Big brown eyes, 2 missing front teeth, a brain that could take apart anything and put it back together better. Her mother had walked out when Maya was 3, leaving behind a diaper bag and a stack of excuses. Noah hadn't had the luxury of falling apart. Their world was a 2-bedroom apartment over a laundromat. Maya's room was full of library books and little science kits. His was full of unpaid bills and old army gear he couldn't quite throw away. Every morning he packed her a lunch, braided her hair the way YouTube taught him, and dropped her at school in his faded blue pickup before clocking in at the depot. Underneath the routine, something heavier sat on his chest. 3 years earlier, his younger brother Diego had gone into a night shift at the Riverside Plastics plant and never come home. The official story said underlying asthma and unfortunate incident with fumes. Noah had seen the photographs from the ER. He knew a gas exposure when he saw one. The company sent flowers. The lawyers sent forms. The plant kept running the smokestacks, coughing over the Arkansas River like nothing had happened. Every time Noah drove past those stacks, his jaw locked so tight his teeth hurt. He didn't have the money for a lawyer. He didn't have the time for a crusade. What he had was a little girl who needed dinner on the table and shoes that fit. So he swallowed the anger. Fixed buses went to parent-teacher conferences and tried to sleep through the nightmares. On a sticky June afternoon, after a 12-hour shift and a microwave burrito, Noah was just settling onto the couch when his phone buzzed in the chipped ceramic bowl by the sink. It was his cousin Elena, all exclamation points. "Don't you dare bail," her text read. "Grandpa's 80th birthday cookout is this weekend. Everybody's coming. No excuses, Ray." He almost typed back, "No." Crowds made him edgy now. Family meant questions he didn't know how to answer. But then Maya came barreling out of her room waving a crumpled flyer. "Dad, Elena says there's going to be fireworks and a band at the pavilion. Can we go, please?" Noah looked at her hopeful face, then at the greasy uniform shirt hanging over the chair. He sighed, feeling the weight of all the times he'd said no to fun because of money or exhaustion. "All right," he said. "We'll go to the cookout." He had no idea that saying yes to one family reunion at a lakeside park would be the first domino. The choice that would put him face to face with a stranger on a burning hotel balcony, and force him to decide what kind of man he really was. Noah knew the lake pavilion was going to be crowded, but he hadn't expected the parking lot to look like a state fair. Trucks lined the grass. Kids tore across the field with sparklers, even though it was still broad daylight. Folding tables sagged under casseroles and paper plates, and someone had hung a banner that read, "Happy 80th Papa Reyes," in faded red letters that drooped in the heat. Maya jumped out of the truck before he even killed the engine. "Look, they have a bounce house." Noah forced a smile. "Stay where I can see you." He wanted to mean it as a warning. It came out sounding like a plea. He hadn't been around this many relatives since Diego's funeral, and that gathering had felt more like a storm front than a wake. Today, he told himself, would be different. Today was a birthday. Today was a chance to show his daughter something normal. But as he stepped through the crowd, the air changed. Not in a dramatic way, more like a slow tightening he felt first in his shoulders, then in the way conversations dipped as he passed. It started with his Aunt Marian. "Well," she said, arms folded tight across her chest. "Look what the wind blew in. We almost sent a search party." He opened his mouth, but she barreled on. "I suppose the buses couldn't survive one weekend without you?" "I made it, didn't I?" he said quietly. Barely. Then came his cousin Luis, who slapped him on the back harder than necessary. "Heard you're still patching up junkers at the depot," Luis said loud enough for the uncles to hear. "You ever think about trying something else? Something with, a future?" Noah swallowed. "It's steady work." Luis smirked. "Yeah, if you like smelling like diesel the rest of your life?" Noah didn't rise to it. He never did. But he felt each jab land somewhere deep, a familiar ache settling under his ribs. He was used to people judging him for what he wasn't: a degree holder, a business owner, a man who made smart choices. He didn't mind the insults. He minded Maya hearing them. She'd wandered toward the dessert table, crouching beside a tray of brownies. When she looked up at him, he could tell she'd heard every word. "Dad," she whispered, "why do they talk to you like that?" He knelt down and brushed her cheek with his thumb. "It's okay, Mija. Let it go." But even as he said it, he felt the sting that came from knowing she'd seen him small in front of his own blood. They made their way toward the picnic tables where the birthday cake sat melting slightly in the heat. His grandfather, thin now, but still stubborn as ever, beckoned Noah closer. "Come sit, boy," Papa Reyes said, patting the bench. Noah obeyed, grateful for the one person who never judged him. But the peace lasted only seconds. His older brother Gabriel slid onto the bench across from him, with a sigh heavy as concrete. "You should have gotten here earlier. Everyone's been asking where you were." "Traffic was bad," Noah said. "You live 20 minutes away." He didn't answer. He didn't need to. Gabriel leaned back, shaking his head. "You know, after everything with Diego, you just disappeared. Couldn't even help us deal with the paperwork. The cleanup, the investigations. A flash of heat traveled up Noah's neck. "You know why," he said quietly. "No," Gabriel said, his voice sharp. "I don't. You think you're the only one who lost him?" Noah looked away. He couldn't tell him that walking into the Riverside plastics plant that night, seeing the chemical burn marks, smelling the sickly fumes trapped in the hallway, had hit him like a mortar blast. He couldn't tell him that he'd had to leave before the memories swallowed him whole. He couldn't tell him that he saw himself in Diego's last moments gasping alone and unprotected. He didn't owe his brother explanations he wasn't ready to give. But still the accusation hung there, sour and heavy. Maya tugged at his sleeve. "Dad, can we go sit somewhere else?" Her eyes were glossy. His chest tightened. "Yeah," he whispered. "Yeah, baby girl. We can." They walked toward the lake, hoping for quiet. But quiet didn't come. Near the water's edge, a group of men in matching polo shirts were talking to Elena, gesturing with clipboards. She caught sight of Noah and waved him over. "Oh good," she said, relieved. "They need the fire safety forms signed, since you're the only one here with emergency training." Her words trailed off when the man in the lead, a burly guy with a sunburned neck, looked Noah up and down. "You're the medic she mentioned." "I was," Noah said. "A long time ago." "Uh-huh." The man snorted. "Look, we're required to have someone on site tonight who's certified, not just a guy who used to be." Noah stiffened. "I still maintain my license." The man raised an eyebrow. "You really?" He wasn't shouting. He didn't need to. The tone, mild disbelief wrapped in condescension, carried further than any yell. "I can show you my ID," Noah said. The man waved a hand. "Don't bother. We'll call someone else. No offense, but we can't rely on a mechanic to handle a medical emergency." Something in Noah's stomach dropped. Not because of the insult he'd heard worse, because Maya was standing right beside him, and her face twisted in a way that pierced him deeper than anything the man could have said. She stepped forward, small but fierce. "My dad saves people," she said, her voice trembling. "He saved a soldier once when nobody else could." The man gave a tight smile, the kind adults give when they don't want to argue with a child. "That's nice, sweetheart." Then he turned to Elena. "We'll handle it ourselves." They walked away, leaving Noah standing in the dust. He stared at the lake, the sunlight bouncing off the water like shards of glass. He felt Maya slip her hand into his, pressing her cheek into his arm. "Why are they being mean?" she whispered. Noah let out a breath that shook harder than he intended. "I don't know," he lied. He wanted to tell her the truth, that sometimes people don't bother to look past grease-stained hands and a paycheck that comes in envelopes instead of deposits. He wanted to tell her that people forget what you've done if it doesn't fit their idea of who you're supposed to be. But he stayed quiet. He swallowed it the way he swallowed everything, until the weight of it settled under his ribs like cold iron. The sun dipped lower, casting long orange streaks over the lake. Fireworks would start soon. Families clustered along the shoreline with folding chairs and coolers. Noah and Maya found a patch of grass near the boathouse, away from the worst of the noise. She rested her head on his shoulder, her little body warm against him. "You're the bravest person I know," she murmured. His throat tightened. "Thank you, Mija." But the peace didn't last. It never did. He heard footsteps behind them, slow, deliberate. When he turned, Gabriel stood there, hands in his pockets, face tight with something between worry and resentment. "We need to talk," Gabriel said. "Not now," Noah replied. "Yes, now." Maya sat up, shrinking a little. "Go play by the boathouse," Noah told her softly. "I'll be right here." She nodded and trotted off, but he could feel her eyes lingering. As soon as she was out of earshot, Gabriel stepped closer. "I talked to someone at the plant," he said. "They said the investigation is closed." "Figures," Noah muttered. Gabriel's jaw clenched. "You can't keep clinging to this idea that something more happened to Diego. It's been 3 years. Let it go." The words hit harder than any physical blow. Let it go. He'd heard that from company bureaucrats, from investigators, from lawyers who saw a grieving brother and smelled a payout they didn't want to give. But hearing it from Gabriel after all these years cut deep. "You weren't there," Noah said quietly. "You don't know what I saw." "Then tell me," Gabriel snapped. But Noah stayed silent. Some truths were too tangled in trauma to rip open at a picnic table. Gabriel exhaled sharply. "This obsession is ruining you. It's ruining your relationship with the family. And it's hurting Maya." That last part made Noah flinch. His hands curled into fists. He didn't raise them, he never would, but the tension rolled through him like a restrained tremor. "You don't get to talk about what hurts my daughter," he said, his voice dangerously low. Gabriel held his stare for a long moment. Then he shook his head. "Maybe not," he said. "But someone has to say what you refuse to hear." He turned and walked back toward the crowd, leaving Noah alone in the cooling air. The fireworks began loud cracks that echoed against the water. Red, white, and gold bloomed in the sky. Families oohed and awed. Noah didn't move. His heartbeat thudded in his ears, each thump, a reminder of everything pressing inward: family judgment, buried grief. The plant that stole his brother, the helpless look on Maya's face when people belittled him. He closed his eyes and tried to breathe, but something in him felt close to snapping, like a wire stretched too tight for too long. Then he heard Maya scream, a sharp, terrified cry from the direction of the boathouse. Noah shot to his feet, every nerve firing at once, the noise of fireworks drowned by pure instinct. He ran toward the sound faster than he'd moved in years, knowing with absolute certainty that whatever came next would change everything. Noah sprinted toward the boathouse, the world narrowing to the sound of his daughter's scream. Fireworks burst overhead, red, gold, white, but he barely registered the light. All he saw was the shadow of the old wooden structure by the lake, half swallowed in darkness. The boards creaked in the wind. Something moved inside. Something fast. Something wrong. "Maya!" he shouted, voice cracking. No answer. He hit the dock at full speed. The planks rattled under his boots. From inside the boathouse came a sharp crash, then a muffled cry, high, panicked, unmistakably hers. He grabbed the rusted latch and yanked. The door jammed. He slammed his shoulder against it, wood splintering. The second hit threw it open with a deafening crack. He stumbled inside and froze. The room smelled like old gasoline and lake water. Moonlight slanted in through gaps in the siding, casting long silver stripes across the floor. In that shifting half-light, he saw the overturned canoe, the metal shelves knocked over, and in the corner, Maya. Pinned by a fallen beam of the collapsing ceiling, her face streaked with dirt and tears. One leg trapped awkwardly, her small hands pushing desperately against the heavy plank pressing down on her. "Dad," she sobbed. "I can't move." He was beside her in seconds. His knees hit the floor hard, but he barely felt the impact. "It's all right, baby. I'm here." He tried to lift the beam. It didn't budge. It was thicker than he expected, an old structural timber waterlogged and swollen from years of storms. His fingers slipped on the damp wood as he tried to get leverage. The beam didn't even groan. Maya whimpered, and the sound sliced straight through his chest. "It hurts," she whispered. "Dad, it really hurts." Noah swallowed hard. He'd heard men say those exact words on desert roads under burning suns, in places where helicopters wouldn't come. Men he couldn't save. Men he still saw in his dreams. Not her. Not tonight. Not ever. He looked around the room, mind racing. Another crash sounded overhead. The roof sagged another inch. Dust rained onto his shoulders. The whole place was giving way. If he didn't get her out now, the next collapse might bury them both. He scanned the cluttered shadows. A rope, a cracked paddle, a rusted anchor. None of it useful. Then he saw it. On the far wall, half hidden behind a tangle of fishing nets, a hydraulic car jack. Probably decades old, the paint flaking off the handle, bent but intact. A tool meant to lift entire trucks. He dashed across the room, grabbed it, and nearly slipped on an oil slick. The jack was heavier than he expected. He dragged it back, metal scraping against wood. Maya tried to breathe through sobs. "Hurry," she begged. "I'm right here," he said, steadying his voice even though his hands shook. "Look at me. Don't think about anything else." He slid the jack beneath the beam fingers, working by instinct. He wedged it against a rib of the floor, positioned the cup under the beam. Then he grabbed the bent handle. "Please work." He pumped once. The jack wheezed but didn't lift. Twice. A creak. A shudder. 3 times. He felt the beam shift under his palm. Only millimeters, but enough. He gritted his teeth, face twisting with effort, as he threw every ounce of strength into the handle. The beam rose slowly. 1 inch. 2. 3. Maya sobbed with relief as her leg came free. "Don't move yet," he warned. Voice strained. "I've got you." But then the jack groaned loudly. Metal buckled. The old mechanism slipped. The beam crashed down again. Noah lunged his body under its shoulder, slamming against the plank, catching it before it crushed her again. The impact shot fire through his entire arm. Something cracked. Maybe wood, maybe bone. But he didn't stop. He held the weight. Every muscle in his body screamed. The ground trembled as another piece of the roof fell behind him, smashing into the floorboards. Dust filled the air. The boathouse moaned like a dying animal. "Go, baby," he gasped. "Crawl out now. I'm scared." He pulled in a breath so sharp it sliced his lungs. "Look at me." She did, eyes wide, glistening with tears. "I am not leaving without you, but you have to crawl out from under right now. You hear me?" She nodded and began sliding on her stomach, using her elbows, inch by frightened inch. He kept his shoulder wedged under the beam, muscles trembling violently. The pressure felt like a truck was parked on him. His breath grew ragged, vision narrowing. "Come on," he urged silently. "Come on, mija." Her foot cleared the beam, then her hips, then her shoulders. At last, she burst free from beneath the timber and scrambled backward. "I'm out!" she cried. "Dad, come on!" He shifted his weight and rolled out just as the beam slammed to the floor, shaking the entire boathouse. The force of the drop knocked him sideways. His shoulder flared with pain, white and blinding. Maya threw herself into his arms. He held her tight, burying his face into her hair, breathing in the scent of lake water and fear and life. "You're okay," he murmured shakily. "You're okay, baby." Behind them, the boathouse groaned again. The whole structure leaned. One more collapse was coming. "We need to go," he said, pulling her up with his good arm. But as they turned toward the doorway, a figure stood silhouetted against the fireworks and moonlight. His cousin Luis. Eyes wide, mouth hanging open. A half-dozen relatives crowded behind him, all staring frozen. They'd seen everything. Noah's arm hung at a sick angle, shoulder swelling already. His shirt was torn. One side of his face was streaked with dirt and blood. He looked like he'd just crawled out of a war zone. Louis whispered, "Holy hell, how did you?" But before he finished, the roof above them groaned sharply. Noah grabbed Maya and rushed forward, shoving Louis aside as the remaining section of roof caved in with a thunderous crash. The impact sent dust and splinters erupting into the night. When it settled, the entire front half of the boathouse was gone. Had they been 3 seconds slower, they would have been buried alive. The crowd stared in stunned silence. Then Elena broke forward. She grabbed Maya, pulling the girl into her arms as tears streamed down her face. "Oh my God, sweetheart. Are you hurt? Are you okay?" Maya nodded, pointing at her father. "Dad saved me," she said softly. He held up the whole thing. Everyone looked at Noah. Everyone saw how badly he was shaking. The blood on his knuckles, the raw burn of effort across his face, the quiet, dazed look of a man who'd used every last ounce of strength in his body and then reached deeper. Fireworks crackled overhead. A red burst illuminated the scene, painting them all in scarlet light. Gabriel stepped forward slowly, as if approaching something sacred. He stared at Noah like he was seeing him for the first time. You shouldn't even be standing," he murmured. Noah didn't answer. He looked at his daughter, safe in Elena's arms. Her small fingers reached back toward him. He smiled weakly, painfully, but with a warmth that cut through every shadow. "I'm okay, mija," he said. "I'm not going anywhere." A murmur went through the crowd, part awe, part shame, all stunned disbelief. All night they'd treated him like the family screw-up, the cautionary tale, the disappointment no one said aloud, but everyone felt. And now they had watched him walk straight into danger without hesitation. They had watched him defy collapsing beams with nothing but his shoulder and willpower. They had watched him save a child, his child, with the same quiet, fierce determination he'd once used to save soldiers no one here had ever met. He didn't boast. He didn't explain. He didn't need to. His actions spoke louder than every whispered judgment and every insult he'd endured. As relatives crowded around, offering help and stammered praise, one truth settled over the lakeside gathering like the smoke from the fading fireworks. Everything they thought they knew about Noah Reyes was wrong, and the night was far from over. The crowd parted slowly around Noah, as if afraid to touch him, as if unsure whether he was flesh or something forged from smoke and grit. Sparks from the last bursts of fireworks drifted over the lake like dying embers. The boathouse lay half-collapsed behind him, a skeleton of splintered beams and broken memories. People stood frozen, mouths open, hands shaking, some still wiping tears from their faces. But through all that noise and disbelief, Noah's eyes stayed fixed on one thing. Maya, wrapped in a blanket someone had draped over her shoulders, trembling but safe. Elena knelt beside the girl, murmuring reassurances. Luis handed Noah a bottle of water with a reverence that bordered on fear. Even Aunt Marian hovered 3 feet away, hands clasped at her chest, whispering prayers under her breath. The night had turned. Everyone felt it. For a moment, no one said a word. The only sound was the hiss of fireworks dissolving into smoke overhead. Then Gabriel stepped forward. Slowly, uneasily. He looked from the ruins of the boathouse to the bruising already blooming along Noah's shoulder to the shaking in his brother's hands he was desperately trying to hide. How did you do that?" Gabriel asked. Not accusing, not mocking, just stunned. Normal people don't lift things like that, or hold them up, or Noah didn't answer. He wasn't sure he could speak yet. His breath still came in ragged bursts. His arm throbbed in time with his heartbeat. But the crowd pressed in, not close enough to crowd him, but close enough to listen. "Is he hurt?" Someone whispered. "I think his arm's broken," another said. "Should we call an ambulance? He saved that little girl's life. My God! Did you see what he did?" Noah finally managed to straighten, though. Pain shot from shoulder to spine. "I'm fine," he said. It wasn't true, but it was the only thing that felt right to say. Maya ran to him, throwing her arms around his waist. He winced but held her tight. Her little fingers clutched his shirt like she was anchoring herself to him. "You're hurt, Dad," she whispered. "It's all right. You held up a whole building." He kissed the top of her head. "I held up what I had to." More relatives gathered behind Gabriel. All of them looked shaken, not just by the rescue, but by the realization they'd never really known the man who just risked everything without hesitation. Elena stepped forward first. "Noah, that was you saved her." Her voice cracked. "You saved her like it was nothing." "That wasn't nothing," Luis murmured. "Yeah," another cousin said. "No one here could have done what you did." Gabriel looked at him again, this time not with judgment or resentment, but with a kind of dawning dread, like he finally understood the weight Noah had been carrying alone. "Noah," he said quietly, "you moved like you knew exactly what that place was about to do. You weren't guessing. You weren't panicking. You were trained." A hush fell over the family. Even the lake seemed to hold its breath. Noah exhaled slowly. He hadn't wanted this. He never planned to open the door to that part of himself again. But the truth had been clawing at him for years, and tonight it finally found its way to the surface. "I wasn't just a medic," he said. His voice was steady, but something brittle flickered beneath it. "Overseas. I worked on rescue teams, structural collapses, barricaded spaces, raid extractions, things most people never see." Someone gasped. Someone else whispered a shocked curse. But he wasn't done. And when Diego died, he said the words catching in his throat. I recognized the signs. Chemical exposure. Not asthma. Not an unfortunate workplace incident. Something else. Something no one wanted to admit. The crowd stiffened. Eyes darted from one person to another. Everyone here had lived in the shadow of that plant, breathing the same air Diego had breathed. "They said you were imagining things," Gabriel murmured, guilt rising in his voice. "They said a lot," Noah replied. "And I let them, because it was easier to let people think I was broken than to drag the truth into the light by myself." His breath trembled. Diego didn't die from asthma. He died from toxins that should never have been in that room. And I know that because I've seen the same thing before overseas in a tunnel we were too late to reach. The fireworks were gone now, leaving only the quiet hum of summer insects. The family stood in a ring around him, stunned, humbled, ashamed. Aunt Marian wiped tears from her cheeks. Gabriel's chest heaved as if he'd been punched. Luis's head hung low. For years they'd whispered that Noah was paranoid, that he'd gone soft, that he'd lost his edge when he came home. Now they realized he'd been the only one who understood what really happened. "You should have told us," someone whispered. He shook his head. "You wouldn't have believed me then. And I wasn't ready to watch you look at me like I'd lost my mind." Gabriel took a slow step closer. "Noah, I'm sorry. God, I'm so sorry." We thought you were shutting us out. We didn't know. You weren't supposed to know." His voice softened. "I didn't want Maya growing up in the shadow of what I used to be. I just wanted her to see me as normal." Maya looked up at him with wide eyes. "You're not normal." He winced until she added quietly, "You're amazing." He closed his eyes for a moment. Let the words settle. Let the world shift into something new. When he opened them, Gabriel was wiping tears from his face with the back of his hand. "Noah, you saved her with one arm. You held up a collapsing roof. And you're telling me you're just a mechanic. I fix buses now," Noah said gently. "That's who I'm trying to be. But it's not all you are." Someone else spoke up. A voice Noah didn't expect. The burly fire safety official, the one who'd dismissed him earlier. He stepped forward from the back of the crowd, hat in his hands. "Mr. Reyes," he said, voice thick. "I owe you an apology. A hell of a big one." Noah blinked at him. The man swallowed hard. "When I said we needed someone certified, I had no idea who I was talking to. What I saw tonight, your timing, your assessment, the way you moved, sir, that wasn't luck. That was training. High-level training." He hesitated, then added, "We could use someone like you. On the county response team. Search and rescue. Emergency ops, I mean it." The crowd murmured. The shift was unmistakable. The man they'd spent years underestimating, the man they'd called stubborn, broken, paranoid, lost, was now the one they looked to with awe, respect, hope. But Noah didn't respond right away. He looked at Maya again, her messy hair, her scraped knees, her trembling smile. He looked at Gabriel, at Elena, at the family that had judged him without ever knowing the truth. And he felt something deep inside him loosen, like a knot that had been tightening for years finally giving way. "I appreciate the offer," he said slowly, "but there's one thing I need to do first." The fire safety officer frowned. "What's that?" Noah glanced toward the collapsed boathouse, toward the direction of the Riverside plastics plant glowing faintly in the distance, toward the part of town that had taken his brother and tried to bury the truth with him. "I'm done running from what happened to Diego," he said, "and I'm done letting that plant hide what it did." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Someone whispered, "He's going after them." Not revenge truth, accountability, justice. Noah squared his shoulders despite the pain. "I'm going to finish what I started, and I'm not doing it alone this time." Behind him, the lake was silent. Ahead of him, every face watched with a mixture of fear, admiration, and a dawning understanding that something enormous had just shifted. Maya slipped her hand into his. He squeezed back gently. Then he looked at the man who had offered him a position. "When I come back," Noah said, voice firm, "we can talk about that job." The crowd stood breathless as he turned toward the night, a man stepping back into the fight he'd avoided for years, no longer alone, no longer underestimated, no longer unseen. And with that decision, the path toward the final reckoning opened before him. The night after the collapse, the Reyes family didn't scatter the way they usually did. They hovered close, moving like people who'd been woken from a long sleep and weren't quite sure how to behave. The air around Noah felt gentler. Somehow voices, lowered eyes, softer postures, humbled. Even the men who'd mocked him earlier approached with an awkward kind of reverence. Luis shook his hand twice, as if afraid it might vanish. Aunt Marian brought him a plate of food he didn't ask for, and Gabriel hovered beside him like a shadow ready to catch him if his injured arm gave out. But the biggest shift came from the quiet acknowledgments, the looks that said, "We were wrong," the murmurs that said, "We didn't know," the touches on his back that said, "Thank you for saving her." Someone gathered a first aid kit. Someone else brought ice. But the thing that struck Noah the most wasn't the attention. It was the way people stepped aside when he walked like he'd earned a space they hadn't known he needed. For the first time in years, he felt seen instead of measured. And when Maya refused to leave his side, insisting he sit down, wrapping his arm with trembling care, the entire family watched her with something close to awe. The next morning, the county inspector taped off the remains of the boathouse. The official cause, structural rot that had gone unnoticed for years. The unofficial truth, if Noah hadn't gone in the incident, would have been a tragedy the Reyes family would never forget. The fire safety officer returned to the park before sunrise. "County wants to talk," he told Noah. "About what? About hiring you?" The man shifted awkwardly. "Search and rescue, hazard training, emergency response, a leadership role." Noah stared at him. "I fix buses," he said automatically. The man shook his head. "You save people, and we need more of that." Gabriel overheard it. Instead of chiming in or teasing or arguing the way he used to, he put a hand on Noah's good shoulder. "You should take it," Gabriel said quietly. "It's who you are. It's who you've always been." The words hit Noah harder than the collapsing beam had, not because of their weight, but because of the admission behind them. A brother finally seeing him for the man he was, and the brother he'd been too blinded by grief to recognize. In the days that followed, the shift spread. The family, once fractured by judgment and misunderstanding, rallied behind him. There were apologies, some clumsy, some emotional, all sincere. There were long talks on porches, late-night confessions, stories about Diego Noah had never heard because he'd stayed away too long. And through all of it, Maya stayed close, proud, in a way she struggled to hide. "You're a real hero," she whispered one evening while tracing the brace on his shoulder. He kissed her forehead. "No, mija, I'm just your dad." "That's the same thing," she said simply. 3 months later, the offer became official. The county emergency response team extended him a full-time position, one that honored both his medic past and the quiet skills he thought he'd buried for good. He accepted. Not because he needed the job, but because he finally felt ready to stop running from the parts of himself he'd spent years trying to hide. The work challenged him. It healed him. It reminded him of the man he once was, and the better one he could still become. Gabriel helped him move heavy equipment into his new office. Elena insisted on buying him a proper jacket for the role. Aunt Marion cried when she saw him in uniform. And every time he drove the county truck through town, people waved in a way that didn't feel performative, just grateful. As for Riverside Plastics, the shift Noah had hoped for finally began. A group of workers came forward with new complaints. The county launched a review. Then the state joined in. And slowly, so slowly it felt fragile, the truth about the plant's practices began to crack open. For the first time since Diego's death, Noah felt the weight of that loss lift, not gone, never gone, but no longer suffocating him. He could breathe again. He could look toward the future without feeling dragged backward. 1 year later, the Reyes family gathered again at the same lake, this time not for a birthday, but for the dedication of a new lakeside shelter built where the old boathouse had collapsed. A plaque near the entrance bore a quiet inscription in honor of everyday heroes who stand between danger and the ones they love. Noah stood beside it. Maya holding his hand, her smile lighting up the morning. Gabriel clapped him on the back. The cousins cheered. Even Aunt Marion brought a casserole she swore she'd made with pride. The community had changed. His family had changed. And Noah had finally stepped into the life he'd been avoiding for years. Later, As the sun dipped toward the water, he walked with Maya along the shoreline. She kicked at the waves with her sandals, humming a tune he didn't recognize. "Dad," she said. "Yeah. Are you happier now?" He looked at her. This little girl, whose scream had dragged him into the truth, whose love had rebuilt him from the inside out. "Yeah," he said softly. "I think I am." They watched the lake shimmer, the new shelter standing solid and strong behind them, a symbol of everything they'd overcome. And in that quiet moment, no sirens, no collapsing beams, no old ghosts tugging at his ribs. Noah felt something settle inside him, something long denied and long overdue. Peace. Sometimes he realized the things that break you are the same things that show you who you've always been. And sometimes the courage you think you've lost is just waiting for the moment you need it most.